welcome on in. For those of you joining us, this is Thinkful's webinar, speaker series, 8 Mistakes Product Designers Make During the Job Hunt. We'll be joined today by special guest Carl Wheatley, and we'll be kind of moderated today by myself. My name is McIntosh. We'll start off with some brief introductions, an especially brief one for me because I am not the topic expert in the room here. My name is McIntosh. I'm a data science mentor for Thinkful, based out of San Diego, California. I've been teaching data science and machine learning courses for a little over a year and a half now. I've been with Thinkful since the beginning of this year. So I am not the topic expert. So like many of you out there, all of my questions will be coming from a very earnest space. I will be doing as much learning as everybody else out there. As far as getting into that new career or switching into the tech industry, before I got started in data science, I had pretty much no programming experience, pretty much zero. So for those of you out there who in the polls said that you're looking to make that big career change, learn a handful of new skills, know that it's possible from whatever background you're coming in with, right? I always like to tell people other humans have learned how to use these tools and techniques. If you're a human, you apply yourself, you certainly can too. I also am a former boot camp graduate, so happy to answer questions about the boot camp experience from a personal perspective. It's a challenging environment. It's a lot of information compressed in a very short amount of time, but I'm a big fan of that structured environment for learning that a boot camp can give you. And then one last note, if you would like to connect with me, continue the conversation after we wrap up, posted my LinkedIn right there in the chat. It's going to be the easiest way to do that. All right, enough about me. Brief introduction for Carl here, our guest speaker tonight. Carl's a product design recruiter at Facebook. Before recruiting others to design roles, he was actually a UI UX designer himself, working with numerous tech startups on application development and design services. Carl's also the co-founder of a meetup called Global UXD, where he helps connect designers with each other to help collaborate and create new opportunities. Having completed block and design lab boot camps before becoming a recruiter, Carl's an expert at helping aspiring designers land their first roles in this really competitive industry. So big welcome. Post some celebratory emojis or some waves in the chat there. Welcome on in to Carl. Great to have you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. So yeah, that was the kind of very high-level overview of your background. And in that very compressed space, by no means does justice to kind of the entire career journey that you've taken. So with that, was wondering if you could just share a little bit more about what that journey has looked like.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me again. I was born in Ireland, raised in the Bay Area, started my career teaching golf lessons. And so at the time, there was a need for reservation software. So I created, with another buddy of mine, we created a mobile app called Presti, which is kind of the first solution to book a reservation on mobile. At that time, golf was pretty far behind, so it was a pretty cool product that we kind of launched at Bay Area golf courses. During that time, I wanted to get into design, and so I did design for the app. I had an engineer that did it, and then I also did the sales part. But during that, I was really interested in doing more into design, so I thought about going to school for it. I started out taking some classes at a city college called Foothill in Los Altos in the Bay Area, and then decided that I think 4 years would have been, I was a community college, so I'd have to transfer. And so I thought that would be a very long time to do design, right, and get into design. So I started out with Block, we partner Thinkful. So I did a Block course. I did their UX course there. So it was, I believe I did 3 months. I think I extended another month because I moved to Amsterdam to do work for some companies out there. But it was a very, very good experience. after that, I did some more classes at Academy of Art and Design Lab. So I did some short 101 design classes at Design Lab, and overall, definitely a good experience at both boot camps and Academy of Art. After that, started my first job. I was a press tee for the golf app, my first job. But then after that, I worked for a company called Product Play, where I got into did mobile design and tablet design for them, and some web. And so started my career doing that. I went over to Amsterdam for a few months and worked for a company called Startup Bootcamp, which is kind of a venture and accelerator program, similar to 500 Startups or Y Combinator and so many others in the Bay Area. I worked with 11 startups out there. I was doing graphic design and UX UI work for different startups. And then I came back and I worked for 500 Startups, which is another accelerator program. And that was in Mountain View, and I worked for a company called Alumify for them on their mobile app. And then I had a lot of people reach out to me like, hey, you designers for our company, and I was starting a meetup at the time, and I wanted to build a network, so I got into recruiting. I still do design projects on the side to stick with it, but my full-time job is doing recruiting. So started out at an agency called The Creative Group, got a lot of good experience. I went to a small agency after that, and then went to another company called BCG Digital Ventures, which is Boston Consulting Group. I was a design recruiter for them and worked for a few of their ventures, and then now I'm at Facebook. I've been here for a little bit over a year now. I'm doing product design recruiting, anywhere from director to junior or entry positions, and also dabbling in doing some research, which I'm new to. So learning lots more about research also. So happy at Facebook.
Yeah, I think it was probably fair to say then that that my intro did not do that career arc justice. You've been all over the map. All over the map, physically, career-wise. Got tons of great perspective on all of those different angles, all of those different experiences. Can't wait to kind of continue to pick your brain here during our conversation today. One quick question before we get into that. In the Q&A here, a lot of these are great ones, and we'll be getting to these during our kind of portfolio and those 8 mistakes section. But a quick one here from Devika was, how was your experience at Academy of Art? Just sharing a little bit more about some of that background and some of those learning experiences.
Academy of Art, it was definitely a good experience. So I did some boot camps before that. So I was actually trying to go get a degree in design, but I did not complete Academy of Art. I was only there for about half a year. It was expensive at the time. I couldn't afford it, and I think I had the skills to get a job, and that's the reason why I left Academy of Art.
Awesome.
But a lot of great students come from there. That's for sure. Yeah.
I'm sure, but I also totally understand getting to that point where you're like, okay, I've got what I need to do. I've got my tools, got my skills under my belt. Time to go out there and actually take this head on. Awesome. Yeah, kind of getting back to some of those early days when you're just getting that product work going. I want to talk a little bit more about that golf app, because you and I have gotten a chance to talk a little bit about it, but every time we talk, I come up with new questions, and I always love hearing kind of those early day experiences. When you were looking at the design for that, what other kind of similar ones existed in the space, or what ones did you, maybe from not golf specifically, but what other examples did you kind of look at as inspiration for some of the work that you did for that?
Yeah. At the time, I think Style Seat for haircuts, a booking platform, obviously Yelp or OpenTable, right, for booking reservations. A little bit after Golf Now came, which is they kind of ate everyone up. So, the thing that I was going for is to build something super simple. We did. So it was a web app for the phone, and then we also did SMS booking. We used Twilio for that, for SMS booking, and so I wanted to create a simple experience to book a reservation. And there was nothing really out there at the time. It was all website, online based, and so forth. And so I wanted to create a very simple mobile experience. And I felt mobile was getting big at the time. It wasn't like a ton of years ago, but it's still mobile was definitely growing at the space, and especially in golf, which is kind of an old person sport, but not really anymore. Right.
Yeah.
So, and plus we lived now the golf course is right next to Apple and all of that, and tech. So
pretty good space to be developing that.
Exactly right. That's kind of why I kind of built the whole experience.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's just every time we talk about it, I get new questions that come up about kind of those early day experiences. So.
I've always wanted to keep doing it. I've always thought about going back into it and doing it again, but it was too a huge sales team, which I couldn't do.
Really? How big of a sales team?
It was just me to start out with, but I think if I wanted to grow it more, it's all sales intensive.
Yeah, it was you doing the work of a much larger team.
I could probably do it now and then hire a team, but back then I couldn't do it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, so yeah, during kind of that course of your whole career arc there, we touched on a couple different topics, a couple different foundational things in the space. So just before we get into that actual job search and maybe some of those mistakes to avoid, I'd love to kind of set our groundwork, our framework, just make sure we're all on the same page with some of these terms as we're talking about them. So first off, I guess we'll start at like the very biggest level. In general, what are we talking about when we're talking about the work that a product designer does? And kind of where does that fit into the tech landscape or at a tech company?
Yeah. So all depends on I think what I've seen really depends on company size and so forth. So, Facebook, for example, is a pretty big company, Google, Apple, and so forth. A lot of these companies are starting to hire product designers, which kind of dabble in or are strong at UX, user experience, and user interface design, right? Some companies are able. I know Google hires a lot of UX designers and a lot of visual designers and so forth, but it's kind of a price for two, right? And you have one person doing both, right? So I think a lot of it is just a new term, right? In the last couple of years. You have your physical product designers that will make furniture and so forth, or Fitbits or whatever. But now you have product designers that work on apps, right, or mobile or web and so forth, right? And so
more of that digital product.
Yeah, and so usually our product designers at Facebook do a lot of UX and visual design. There's every company has design systems now and design patterns and all of that, but we want product designers should be able to do, some UX and some visual design, UI.
Cool, very cool. And then on that kind of very last note there, let's break apart UX and UI. And I guess some of those other design specific roles because you also talked how now you're starting to grow a little bit more into that research piece. So I was wondering if maybe you could talk about those different specific roles underneath that product design umbrella.
Yeah. So user experience pretty much builds the navigation through the mobile app or the product, and visual design in simple terms makes the app look pretty, right? And eye-catching to the user, right? So you always want to build a good experience for the user, make it simple and quick because people get impatient. And you want to make something pretty so they stay on the website and book or buy something.
Yeah, engage with it, right?
Yeah, I think websites I've definitely seen even portfolios, right? I've seen like outdated portfolios or websites that are still stuck in the 90s or 80s, and it's just a lot of people these days I feel like don't trust websites that look outdated.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's not to name names, but on the data science side, you can imagine that we're not as focused on that as we should be. And there's a blog that I follow and that I recommend to a lot of my students because the content is actually really good. But I always have to kind of sell people on a little bit because the overall using it, that experience, and the visual design, both are just really not good. It's called KD Nuggets. I'll post that right there. So yeah, great content, but speaks exactly to that piece that you're talking about with kind of that trust piece and that actual engagement piece.
Yeah, and that's why you hire designers.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all need each other. We all need each other. We're all family.
Yeah,
So.
definitely. So that's, I guess, that's kind of a bad one, or one that's could have some improvements. What are one example or a couple examples of maybe your favorite pieces of design the companies use today out there?
I think Spotify. I think Spotify is good for driver mode. So they use larger buttons to move through songs. I think that's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
Yeah, I'm definitely a fan of using that.
So a lot of people use Spotify, right? Especially while driving.
Mm-hmm.
Even for not being biased, but Instagram for like photo sharing, right? It's just very, very simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think all these companies have to use build simple products now for customers to use them. So Instagram does a lot of different things. One of them, obviously, sharing, and now you can buy products, right? So obviously, I use that a lot. And I think Amazon does a great job too, right? Just basically having products catch your eye, other products that you've looked at, and they just want you to buy, right? And so they and you do. So you always see
making those options really easy for you, right?
Yeah, you always see product. You always see things in your doorstep you don't remember ordering, right? So I think that's kind of the Amazon effect that they build such a good experience and it's too simple to buy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So those are probably my three top apps and stuff that I use probably on a regular basis that I think have really strong design.
Yeah, and it seems like a pretty common theme, but like among all of those and some of those other experiences that you shared for the products that you've built is that simplicity piece, right? And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the importance of integrating that simplicity into the experience for that end user.
Yeah, let's do, for example, Venmo, right? Venmo's or Facebook Messenger. You could pay pay people now. You have Venmo, Square. I think payment apps, right? You had PayPal kind of first. I think it was kind of clunkier and kind of hard to pay people. And Venmo, and there's fees, and then Venmo came along and pretty much just owned the market, right? And so it's just I think building something so simple as putting your phone number in, paying somebody, it takes seconds, right? And so I think Venmo is built a very kind of a payment culture, right? You have Stripe, everybody uses Stripe, right? There's all these payment apps that are doing such a good job to, just make people and have built around security, and it makes people very, very easy way to pay a company, right? So I think back to simplicity is, I think companies just have to build things that are simple for this day and age that people have, ADD, and they can't focus on it for so long. They grab their attention quickly, and so
it's like part of like a result of that like attention economy term, right?
Exactly.
That you hear, yeah.
So I think a lot of companies they do a very good job now. They just have to build a very simple, functional website or mobile app, or else they won't grab anyone's attention. People won't use it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, and kind of interesting to think about that as like obviously inherently valuable on its own, but also as like a result of kind of that attention economy process.
Yeah, sure.
So when we're talking about building some of those experiences, you know, whether it's kind of a smaller, just getting started, or maybe you're at one of these companies joining like an existing team, what are some of those foundational skills or interests that you might need to have before you jump into product design work?
Yeah, I think a lot of companies. Some companies have their own software in house. I know some of the big guys do, but Sketch is a company that blew up overnight a couple years ago that everyone uses now. Adobe XD, I think is doing pretty well, but Figma is another powerful tool that everyone uses too, right? So I think having one of those tools, I think is very good to use, especially Sketch because every company uses it now. I think general wireframing and so forth. And I always start wanting to look at Pinterest and examples out there, right, at certain designs, right, to get inspiration, right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think those tools are very good to use. But I always put a good emphasis on visual design. Even everyone wants to, there's a lot of UX designers and a lot of boot camps for UX design now. But I think the biggest thing also is to have at least I know every company has design systems out there and so forth, but I think a lot of companies, I think it'd be a heck of a lot easier to get a job if you're somewhat decent at visual design or UI design.
Nice. Right. Awesome. And then I know for some of you in the chat, you're also saying that maybe you have some of these tools and you're looking for that kind of trying to break into the scene. Go ahead and share some of the ones. If you use one of these specific ones and you like it a lot, show some love there in the chat. I always thought that was cool in our last design conversation. Some people were very passionate about one over the other.
Yeah.
So
one's going to start saying is my guess, but that's the new tool for the last couple of years.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll get some of that going in the chat there. But yeah, so I think that's a really interesting piece that you're saying as far as trying to, where you're looking at Pinterest and, do you have kind of like a little, even if it's not like a physical notebook or something on your computer, you have kind of like a little repository going of these experiences, design, and that actual experience that you like?
Yeah, I use Pinterest and Dribbble for a lot of inspiration, right? I think design it goes a phase, right? The hamburger menu that everyone uses, right? Some days it's gonna be different. I bet in the next couple of years, right? But I think I think definitely Dribbble and Pinterest is where I would use Pinterest boards for like web design or for leads pages to get inspiration and so forth, right? Just to, and necessarily, I think the best way to learn also is to copy other designs. I think it's a great way to learn, right? But those are kind of the tools I use to get all my inspiration for different designs that I do.
Yeah, and I think that's a really cool piece too to talk about is looking at some of those other ones and going, hey, yeah, how can I replicate some of this? Because obviously there's been a tremendous amount of work put into that product, especially if it's by a larger team or a larger company where, this has kind of been validated in some sense, right? And so you can go and you can look for some of those best practices.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, say in the chat, we've got some love coming through. We've got Adobe CC. Absolutely love Figma there. InVision. Nice. Very cool. Awesome. And then I did have a quick Q&A that is on this design tools piece. So let me pull this up here. So Yen asks, speaking of design tools, do hiring managers care what do you refer more or which tool do you prefer? For example, I prefer Sketch, but if the company uses Figma, would it affect their decision to hire you?
No. No, I wouldn't say so. Everyone's different, but if you know Sketch, you can learn Figma pretty quickly, and vice versa. So I think Figma is probably built on top of Sketch, if I were to guess, since they were way before them, or a couple years before them. But I think if you learn even Adobe XD, they're all pretty similar, right? And so I wouldn't say there's that much of a learning curve, right? And there's always great tutorials. Figma has a great library of tutorials, and Sketch does too, and all those companies do a great job of of creating tutorials to learn their products, right? But I don't think maybe if it's a one person shop and they really need you to use this one tool, then maybe yeah, probably. But if you're a big company, they usually use multiple tools, right? Or they have their own tools that will teach you.
Yeah. So it sounds like making sure that you have kind of those foundations and that mastery of everything built first, and then you'll be able to translate that relatively easily across those, right?
Yeah. And I think if you do a boot camp, they'll use Sketch or Figma, right? If you go to traditional school, they'll use Figma or Sketch, right? And if you're self-taught, just billions of tutorials to teach you.
We've got shots fired here. Chris says, unless it's Azure.
Sure.
Yeah. Awesome. No, very cool. And yeah, great question there from the Q&A there. And I know we've got some other great ones that we'll be getting to there in just a bit. I just grabbed that one from Uyen just because it was so specific about what we were talking about. Yeah. Awesome. So after you've got some of those tools under your belt, you've got the visual design piece, you've got Sketch or Figma, you've got those foundations along with those actual implementation tools. I want to start talking a little bit about kind of that job market piece. So after you're out of that learning experience, I guess let's break down the where a little bit first. So for where should be looking at applying for these design jobs. And I guess we'll start kind of with cities and with industries, I guess. So for cities, what are some of the best places, or what are some of those best markets that you look at for design jobs?
Besides the Bay Area, which is crowded, I would say Seattle, LA area, San Diego is coming up. New York is definitely hot, but I think Austin is going to be the next big one. I know Facebook just bought some buildings down there, Apple, Google, a lot of companies, it's more affordable and still nice, but somewhat still expensive Austin area. But I think Austin's the next hot market.
Nice, very cool. And then really quick, there's this question just came in that is pretty relevant to one of those pieces that we were talking about. So David asked, do you run into copyright or patent issues if you're emulating the work of others in some of those design activities that you see?
So I could be wrong. I'm not a lawyer with this one, but I don't think you can patent a design for mobile or web design. If you think about it, every company uses the hamburger menu, and there's no way someone has a patent for the hamburger menu, right? So I don't think you run into. I think if you copy everything word for word and image everything, you could run into a few issues. But I don't think there's any problem with. There's so many like Instagram copycats out there, or Groupon, right? Mm-hmm. If the company's big, there's other markets that are going to copy that company, right? So again, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing design similar to other companies, because that's what people are used to. So why not do that?
Yeah, especially when you want that consistency piece, right? You want users to not be like totally surprised by whatever experience they're jumping into, right?
You don't want like, for example, navigation bar. You don't want like you go to Target every day, and you go to Walmart and Block and websites and everything. And then you don't want yours to be the bottom left corner, right? Because people are not used to it, right? And they're not going to stay on a website for that long, right? So you're going to want to build your website similar to, or design a website or app similar to other, competitors out there.
Yeah. Quick side note, Chris posted a really cool history of the hamburger menu there in the chat. I'll make sure that we actually add that to the reference sheet.
Oh, look at that there. It's funny, honestly.
Yeah, just so everybody knows, there is like a small section there where we have additional links. So I'll make sure that we update that as we go as well. And then if you are posting a question there in the chat, just as a quick logistic note, I may bump it over to the Q&A piece just so I can keep track of those and make sure that we're not missing any there. So Alan asks a quick follow-up question on that piece that we were talking about. If every company is doing something similar to each other, how does innovation happen, or how do those changes in the design space come about?
Yeah. This is my opinion on this answer is I think a lot of trends are done by large companies, right? So your big Amazon, Google, Microsoft, big companies I believe start the trends, right? Because there's tons of eyeballs on these websites and these products. And so usually people want to adapt to that. And that's what starts the innovative trends on other apps and mobile websites and so forth. That's just my opinion. I don't think there's a really right answer for that one. But like Teresa said, big companies equal big user base, right? So more the users are, and you build a trend, people are going to start adapting to that and build it into their website, mobile apps, and so forth products.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah. Awesome. So backtracking a little bit to that piece that we were on, where we're just getting started in that job search space. So we talked a little bit about those, some of those big hot cities right now, but I'm sure that these design roles are growing in a bunch of different markets. And as you're wherever you are, when you're looking to apply to these positions, I guess in that digital search space, what are some of the best websites or some online resources? Where can you go to find these positions posted?
Yeah, I think number one, would be LinkedIn is very good. Facebook Jobs, you have Indeed, Monster, Dribble is good, Behance. I also like going to 500 startups or Y Combinator websites, because they usually have a list of all their companies on there and their job openings. So I think those are good websites. You can just type in accelerator programs in your area and there'll be a bunch, right?
But and for some of those 500 startups or Y Combinator, some of those really early stage companies, are those roles or teams that you like to suggest for new product designers, or is that a good space to be in?
I think it's another avenue, right? Some of these companies are they really need some designers, right, to build out their product and get funding, right? So what I did, I'm looking for my first job. I went and first of all, I wanted to build a portfolio, which we'll go over that. But I email companies from Y Combinator, Techstars, all these accelerator programs, because a lot of these companies come in and they have 3 to 6 months to build a product out, so they really need some free labor or some designers to work with them. So I think that's just another good avenue to build a portfolio or to get into this space. Right? I wouldn't say necessarily it's easier, but it could be for some of the not as known companies.
Yeah. And in the Q&A here from Chris, on that note, when you're looking at some of those, applying through some of those sites, can you talk a little bit about whether you're applying with the quick apply, where you have some of your information uploaded and you just check, yeah, I'm interested, or do you actually go and find those positions on those aggregated sites and then go and apply on that directly on the company's site?
Yeah, so I believe like LinkedIn, for example, has a quick apply, I think, or you can upload your resume and all that kind of stuff, right? Or you go to the website, right? I believe it all goes to the same bucket. I don't think it really matters what you do, but if it's on LinkedIn, you might as well just click it and apply, right? It'll go to their database, right, at the company. It goes to them for sure, right? Or you could just simply apply online, which does the same exact thing. So they all go to the same bucket either way.
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah, and great question there. Thank you for bringing that one up too.
One thing to add, I'm not sure if you hit it later or not, but and I think applying for jobs, I always recommend everyone that go to a company website, apply to the job, go on LinkedIn, find a recruiter first or a designer, and say, hey, my name is Carl. I applied online. Please take look at my portfolio resume. I'd love to work for your company. And you don't need to be aggressive and ping them every hour, 2 days. Just give it a few days. May fall after a week or so because I get hundreds of messages a day, right? And it's really hard to answer every single person, right? I try to, but some will simply
inevitably stuff falls through the cracks.
It does. It happens, right? And so I have 100 LinkedIn messages, and then I reach out to people, and so there's so much, right? I always tell everyone apply online, and then message a recruiter or a design manager or director, and tell them you applied, so they can take a look at your resume. Just one extra little simple step to do.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm sure we'll have some follow-up questions on that piece too, but that's a great, another great way to kind of just make sure that you're doing everything you can to get your foot in the door there, or at least get your name and your portfolio out there. A couple other just real quick names to throw out. Arwa says, Crunchbase, great for looking at upcoming companies. Yeah, another cool way to check out what's in your city, what's coming around.
AngelList.
I was just about to say, AngelList is another good one to have in mind. Even if it's not like for a specific, sometimes the names and the titles on there are a little bit different. For people who aren't aware, AngelList is kind of a job board site just for startups.
Simply, I think you just type in UX design jobs and there'll be a billion other job links will come up also.
Yeah. And built-in sites are other great ones.
Yeah.
What Chris means by that is there's like built-in San Diego or built-in San Francisco, built-in Denver.
Yeah.
So definitely check out those built-in branded sites for kind of specific companies that are growing in that local market, as well as those jobs. They do a great, built-in does a great job of kind of narrowing that down to your specific city, to what your specific market actually looks like.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, all right. And then kind of coming back again to our job hunt piece. When you're thinking about that overall job search process, you're looking at these different websites, right? You're maybe reaching out to a couple of those recruiting managers or those hiring managers. How should you think about breaking down your time during the job hunt? Where are some of the places that you want to spend the most time? And I guess on the flip side of that, what's kind of not the best use of your time?
I think applying for jobs, it's a game, right? A lot of it's luck, right? That's just what I experienced, right? And I think applying for jobs is a full-time job, right? So I think if you're not working, then you should probably spend your time applying for jobs. But if you are working, right, then I was spending maybe an hour a day looking for a job, right? Looking for a new job. But I think all the basic websites, Dribble and so forth, is probably the best use for your time. LinkedIn is probably one of the best ones because everyone posts there, pretty much, right? So I would spend a little bit hour a day and so forth, just applying for jobs, right? And messaging recruiters at these companies. And don't take it personal if they don't get back to you. Sometimes it slips through the cracks, but just ping again, simply asking nicely if you can look at their portfolio, right?
Totally. Awesome. No, I I like having all of that framework, all of that foundation about kind of some of the good things to do, some of the ways that you want to focus your time before we break down some of the big mistakes to avoid.
Yeah. One quick thing is kind of funny that, so like, I'll get messages sometimes like, oh, I hate, why are you posting this? I hate recruiters and so forth, right? And you got to think about it, right? If you're rude and means my over message, there's probably some low chances, you're going to get hired at that company, right? So if someone's going to get back to you, it's not personal, keep messaging them. But I think the best thing is to always be constant, because that's what helps you get through the door.
No, that's great.
A little bit of advice there.
I love that. Awesome. So we've got actually kind of on that same, in like a similar still foundation building vein, we've got some best practice Q&A questions there. So I think I want to start with some of these kind of proactive. What are some of those things that you want to build into your portfolio? And then as we kind of uncover some of those, then maybe we'll start to tie them back to some of those 8 big mistakes that we want to avoid. So yeah, one question there in the Q&A, we can ask again, what's more important, your resume or your portfolio? Can you talk about that a little bit? Heard the portfolio is way more important. How many projects do companies expect to see on somebody's portfolio?
Good question. So, all right, portfolio. I think, having 2 or 3 projects is good. If you're coming out of a boot camp, I would just make sure your work is strong. You're talking about, what you did on the project, what your peers did, because a lot of portfolios you don't really know like who worked on what, right? And so I think a big thing is to add is to put a little piece in there. Say, hey, I'm Carl. I work on the mobile experience for this website, whatever it is, right? And so I think that's a big thing to put on your portfolio. I think 2 or 3 case studies. And if you go to a boot camp, I think every boot camp does a very good job at building a portfolio. That's why I say a lot of these UX designers, I think having strong visuals helps a ton. So, take a look at inspiration out there, right? Like I said, Pinterest, Dribble. There's so many good resources out there, and just I think it'd be a lot easier to get a job if you also do some visual design too. So I think 2, 3 projects, having good, use Squarespace, Wix, WordPress, whatever you're comfortable with. I think website doesn't matter. Layout, they all use the same layout, so that's fine, right? But I think the big thing is to have kind of what you worked on, what did the team work on, visuals, and so forth.
Yeah, awesome. And then kind of one other one.
Resume?
The resume piece of that.
Resume. To help recruiters out, not being biased, but I think for resumes, it's always good.
That is what you want to think about, right? The person who's going to be seeing that is.
I think even on your LinkedIn, right? I think it's always great to put bullet points of kind of what you worked on, right? So you could say, my team built a new feature. We have 85% more users this year. So accomplishments are good, and kind of what you worked on the project. So bullet points on that for LinkedIn kind of match it with your resume too. And that's perfect. There are some. If you guys can always reach out to me, or if you have time later, I'll tell you some kind of keywords to put in your resume and LinkedIn that recruiters kind of search for.
And I like that piece too, just to kind of dig out one specific part of that is the consistency again, where you want to make sure that what you have on your resume lines up with what you have on your LinkedIn, lines up with what you're putting out there when you're reaching out to that recruiter, right? As soon as you start to get some of that inconsistency, all it does is kind of raise questions, right? You're like, well, which part of this is actually what they did? What isn't?
I'm definitely guilty of that because I used to do the same thing, right? But I'm definitely a lot better at it. And
yeah, I was going to say, well, now we can speak at least with some hindsight, even if we weren't good at it back when we were.
So.
Yeah. Awesome. And then one last question on kind of the pro building out that portfolio piece. And then after this, I want to switch gears into some of those mistakes, just looking at our time. So Chris asks, I've gotten so many conflicting opinions about my portfolio. What are some of those key tenets that you deem essential for case studies and for your portfolio? What are some of those kind of cornerstones that you need to have in there?
Yeah, I think you asked Dodd, you asked me, we'll probably see something different about your portfolio. I think that's just the way it is, right? Everyone has their own opinions.
I'll definitely say something different, and it won't be as accurate as what you have to say.
Don't take Dodd's advice on portfolio.
Yeah, don't do it.
I think at the end of the day, you're selling yourself, right? And I think you got to remember that a lot of these recruiters don't have a design background. I'm very lucky to have that, which has definitely helped me through recruiting. But a lot of these, recruiters or / sourcers, people that usually find you, a lot of them have a design background. So you want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward, right? And having great layout, make sure your portfolio looks pretty and organized, right? And if you hit all those steps, they will usually put you through to the next steps, right? But if your designs are everywhere and they're not clear, they're probably going to pass on, right? Because they're looking through hundreds of people a day, right? I look through probably 100 people a day easily, right? And so, we're looking for strong visuals. We're looking for sometimes wireframes or different projects. But a lot of these boot camps, they teach that, right? They all know what they're doing, right?
I was going to ask, and is this another just kind of key place where that visual design piece comes back in, where you're making sure that up front that visual design is strong?
I think I've talked to majority of the boot camps out there about, I look at people from Block, Design Lab, Journal Assembly, a million portfolios a day, right? And a lot of them look exactly the same, right? But I think the ones that get through more are, especially for product design or product design jobs and so forth, will be the ones with stronger visuals, right? If you're doing the UX job only, then that's probably a little bit different. But I think companies will kind of gravitate towards you if you have more stronger visual design, right? I think everyone can learn visual design, right? There's many resources out there to better your designs.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's something that always comes through strongly during these conversations that we have is how important that visual design piece is. And that's huge. Awesome. So those are kind of some of the pro things to be focusing on. And then we've got some questions there in the Q&A that are largely centered around some of these mistakes to avoid. So let's start building those out here. So some of those 8 biggest mistakes that you see when you're checking out some of those portfolios, some of these applicants. Let's get started with number 1 here. What's one of the big ones?
All right. Here's one thing that I used to do myself, and I learned it's not good. Everyone's different, but I think when people put percentages on their portfolio. So, my example, my Medium post is like, I know 40% design, WordPress 80%, front end 50%, so UX 10%, right? Or like Sketch 40%, whatever, for example, right? I think you want to leave those out because I think, when people are thinking and looking at your portfolio, if they think, oh, you only know 10% of Sketch, oh, they're probably going to be good for this position because we need someone 100% of Sketch, right? And learn how to use it, right? So I think percentages, I used to do that too. But I think now that I've learned from everything and, applying for jobs is probably one of the worst things to find.
It's almost like you're like undercutting yourself a little bit, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Why not be 100%?
Right.
I think on my resume portfolio, I might have put like, Adobe logo or Sketch logo and something like that, but do not put percentages.
Yeah.
That's just my.
And then if you guys also want to kind of reference some of these points that we'll be talking about, like this putting percentages, and you want like a visual piece of what that looks like, definitely go to that reference sheet, the same one that we linked, and the very first supplemental resources piece, that biggest mistakes article, that's the one by Carl, and that's kind of where we're going to be unpacking some of these topics from. Yeah. So we're definitely wanting to avoid some of those, avoiding undercutting ourselves by saying that we're not good or that we're definitely lacking at some of these other ones.
Yep.
Cool. What? Let's grab another one here. What's kind of a number 2 thing for you that stands out these days when you're looking over those portfolios?
Yeah. Another thing that I have done is blurry images. And so I think resolution is key for design, for a certain resolution. And so I think you always want to have, crisp images, right? I think it's very easy to do in sizing. And so why not do it, right? I think it comes down to being detail oriented, right? Mm-hmm. If you have blurry images all over your website, again, even consumer side, no one's going to probably pick that website, right? And so definitely recommend always having strong and, pixel perfect images. There's so much technology out there these days. It's so easy to, export images from Sketch.
I was going to say, yeah, what are a couple like quick fixes for that particular problem?
I think right now is just, sizing it correctly, but Figma, Sketch, all these tools, they all have export built into it where you get exported perfectly fine, right? So I think now you see a lot less pixelated images.
You're definitely not wanting to screenshot some piece of your work and then put that in your portfolio, right?
Definitely not. I've done it in the past, but I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I never have for my design portfolio, but that's also because I don't have a design portfolio. But
yeah,
that's my easy out.
No, for sure. And a lot of the mistakes is, I've done in the past. I've seen in the past. Another one is grammar. I wouldn't call myself the best person around grammar or spelling, but I think applying for jobs is one thing that some people look at. Recruiters actually search for misspelled words, just because it's kind of a lot of people do it, and so it's another kind of recruiting tactic that people use.
Really? Okay, cool. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense kind of looking for that attention to detail piece, especially on the design piece. You're making things that people are going to be interacting with, so you want all of that to be really squared away, right?
I think a lot of people will know that sometimes there are language barriers and stuff like that, and so I think everyone's pretty fair around it. But if you have a million spelling errors, then that's probably not great. Yeah. If you have 1 or 2, I think you're going to get hired still.
Yeah, and those 1 or 2 in the overall process, you'll be reviewing those to make sure that those don't get through. Very cool. So far we've got those percentages. We're cutting them. We're avoiding blurry images, right? We're making sure that we're exporting properly instead of actually taking a screenshot or doing something else like that. We've got some grammar and spelling mistakes that are out the door. What else? What else are some of those things that maybe make you cringe a little bit, either reviewing ones that you see or maybe looking back on some of those early mistakes that you might have made and going, hey, don't do the same things that I did here?
Yeah, this one is not, I won't say like make it or break it really, but there are like really good portfolio templates out there where there's on WordPress especially, there's a lot of pre-made templates. You just don't want like an outstanding template and your work is this crap, right? You don't want to have an outshine template while you're having decent work, right? So I just think I think I saw a question about coding your portfolio. If you want to learn front end, then you probably should do that. But a lot of companies won't ask you, to do any development work if you're a designer, unless you're doing both roles and you're at a three-person startup, right? And it's probably different. But if you're at a larger company with a decent amount of designers and engineers, I don't think a lot of boot camps kind of have you code your portfolio, but personally, I don't think that's much needed since there's so many good companies out there already.
Mm-hmm. How much does having some of that experience help you in your day-to-day, having some of that front-end programming experience?
I think, I don't know. I think, I know some HTML, CSS, I can't really do it from scratch, but I can edit, website stuff. But I don't think it's got me a job just because I know that. But I think sometimes, if you're working with a front-end team, I think it's definitely nice that you guys did both talk about certain things, but I don't, unless you want to do it for fun, but I don't think you're going to get hired because HTML, CSS, unless that job requires it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. And like you're saying, maybe probably a little bit more relevant for those much smaller teams where you might be asked to take on a little bit more of those other pieces. Nice, awesome. So yeah, our last big one there, just as a recap, don't have a template that looks better than those different pieces that you're presenting. I think that's huge. Awesome. So let's tackle one more of these. What should our next one be? I like this one on here, calling yourself a guru, ninja, or unicorn.
I think it's playful, right? I don't know. I think
is that a deal breaker? Like if you see somebody that has that on their portfolio or resume?
Not really. I think years ago people were like, "Oh, I'm a Spider-Man designer, I'm a Scorpion UX designer, or whatever," right? I think it's just it's playful, right? I think it grabs some people's attention, of course. I don't think that it's gonna it's gonna make it or break it, to be honest.
Yeah.
At the time,
I was gonna say you've never looked at an applicant and gone, "Wow, they're a ninja. I have to hire this person," right?
If they're a ninja and they're amazing, then awesome. But if they're a ninja and not very good, then I don't know.
Okay, yeah. So we'll be careful about that self-branding of those.
When I was writing this, I probably had a little bit stronger opinions, but going back on it, I think I see it a lot less now than I used to, for example.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And then there's a quick Q&A there on that template piece we were talking about. Stephen had asked, does it matter if you use a template for that? I
would use a template. Why not? Templates are out there for to create your life more simple, right, and easier to create a portfolio, right? So I would, Squarespace, Weebly, Wix, WordPress, all these websites, they have templates built in, and definitely use it.
Yeah, it becomes kind of more of a tool for you, right? So you don't have to actually focus on building out that website, building out some of that front end stuff. You can focus more on the pieces that you're putting into there.
Exactly. It's time consuming. Unless you're a stellar developer, go for it. But it's going to take you forever if you don't.
Yeah.
And that job can be gone. It's all timing.
Yeah. Very cool. Awesome. Great question there. As a follow-up for that. Very cool. So let me, and then I believe I just accidentally marked one as answered. Yeah, so sorry. So let's get into that one so I don't forget it because I accidentally marked it as answered. But that question is, do recruiters care they're looking at 50 applicants and 15 of them have the same template?
Not exactly. Like I think for boot camps, especially some boot camps, I think in the Bay Area at least, right? There's a lot of boot campers, a lot of boot camps, and I always like let's say everyone in the whole school uses Little Caesars for their project. Personally, I always kind of say, hey, change it to Pizza Hut or like Little Luigi's or something, so that recruiter doesn't like just know that you're from Block or General Assembly and all these other boot camps, right? I don't think it's gonna hurt you, but if you're looking at 50 people in a row from Little Caesars, you probably don't look at these projects. You probably don't look at these portfolios closely enough as you should, right? Mm-hmm. Or you would, right? So
adding that little bit of difference can kind of make it jump out if you are doing it. Awesome. Yeah, very cool. Great question there. Nice. A lot of good follow-ups on that template piece. So very cool. So let me see here. So did we miss any of on that template piece? I know we have the using a branded site to show your work. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that branded piece.
Yeah, I think my article is say do not do it. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to change my mind right now and say it doesn't matter. I think if it's carl.weebly.com, whatever. I think if you're just saying out for like portfolios and all that, then it doesn't matter. I think for me, I'm trying to build a personal brand. I was doing design and recruiting. I like to do webinars and write ebooks and do blog posts. So for me, I don't want a bunch of Weebly branding on my website where I just pay $8 a month and build a WordPress site, or Weebly and pay $8 to get branding off, right? If you can afford it, do it. If you can't, you'll get a job still.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And I like that we have the live amendments to the article here.
I think unless you're going for like a job that you need HTML and CSS experience, then I'd probably take off that .weebly or whatever.
Yeah. There's a question here in the chat from Rahul asking, wouldn't that alter the data piece? Not sure exactly which piece that's referring to. If you could just clarify that a little bit more, always happy to answer those questions coming in. Awesome. Very cool. I think one of the big ones, and probably one that you won't have changed your mind on here from the article, is using an out-of-date portfolio. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I've seen both, right? So like I'll see someone that worked on like iOS 6, for example, right? The buttons are a lot different. It wasn't flat design. I don't know. It goes both ways. I believe that if you're definitely like looking, if you're at Microsoft for like 40 years, then yeah, you're probably gonna have some outdated stuff, right? But if you're doing concept projects for your portfolio and all these different projects, then I would definitely redesign the website from 3 or 4 years ago, right? Or you could do like before and after, right? So you keep those before and then say, hey, this is a redesign that I did for the website, and here's the redesign. Right, and you keep the old work, right? I think a lot of people like seeing befores and afters, right? I think a lot of people get sold that way, right? It's like body workout videos, right? Befores and afters, right?
Yeah.
It's the hook, right? So I think portfolios is probably good too. I think if you're at a big company for only a couple of years and the work is so outdated, then definitely redesign it or just take out your portfolio.
Awesome. That's cool. I like that a lot, being able to even repurpose some of that and do an additional before and after. Yeah, because you already put in the work. You already put in the work there, right? You might as well at least be able to build off of it.
It's not necessarily like lying when people ask you about it, but like no one's gonna go into detail and like look at your background that it's real or anything. But I think you say, hey, this is a concept that I wanted to work on after I left the company or during the company. We haven't quite launched it yet, or we might launch it. I might pitch it to my group, whatever. I think it's totally fine.
Awesome. And then even like kind of, if you do go back and maybe refresh some of those old ones, that's kind of like a part of product design, right? You're not just creating totally, I mean, sometimes you are creating these totally new UX, UI experiences from scratch, but a lot of times you're iterating on existing products, right?
True.
Awesome. Yeah, and so you can always, I guess, talk about it from that space as well. And then the last one from the article that I don't think we've got a chance to talk about yet is the showing too much work piece. So I'm wondering if you could unpack that showing too much work, maybe some, high level examples of like, if you are looking at a portfolio and you're just like, this is too much.
Yeah. I think a prime example is people going from like graphic design into UX design, right? So those show like print work from like 1997 when they were first getting into graphic design. I think if it's like really strong work and you updated it, I think it's fine. But I'd always just kind of show a few of your best work, right? And my portfolio used to always have everything. Definitely guilty of it, but I definitely when I was applying for jobs, I kind of made it where I would have 2 or 3 really strong projects, right? And that doesn't mean if you have more experience or less experience, I'll still only show a couple of solid projects, right? Because you want to sell yourself, right? And put your best foot forward. So I think I think 2 or 3 projects is probably the appropriate projects to have. And I think looking for internships or doing redesigns of like Pinterest or whatever, I think it does help, because if you can showcase you have strong designs, I think it's good. But if you're doing a concept and the design's crap, then I don't think it's going to help you.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Awesome. So I'm looking at our time here. I think that kind of wraps up our big 8 mistakes, at least initially, that we wanted to touch on there. I certainly appreciate you unpacking some of those from the article, amending some of those from the article. Just kind of getting to be able to pick your brain there. That's super helpful, super valuable. And then Chris is saying, wait, are you saying that we should UX design our portfolio? I like that. Take it one level higher. Awesome.
We'll do another webinar to cover a lot of these.
Yeah. Awesome. So with that, I want to kind of shift gears, just looking at our time. I want to make sure we get to some dedicated time for our Q&A here. So I'll start jumping into that. If it's something that we've already answered, I'll go ahead and just read it out loud to let you know we're looking at it, and then mark it as answered as well.
I'll try to make sure I do quick but good answers.
Yeah, definitely.
Forever, so.
Yeah, we'll strike that balance. Get everybody, make sure we're not taking up too much of your extra time here. So from Stevens here, what kind of items should you avoid in a portfolio? I think we got a chance to talk about a lot of those different items. I'm not sure if there's any other like quick types of projects or different pieces that come to mind as you were talking through those that you wanted to add on.
Sorry, say it one more time. Sorry, I blanked out for a second. Sorry, I was reading some of the questions.
Yeah, no worries. So I was just wondering so we got a chance to talk about some of those very specific things that you want to make sure that you're not putting in your portfolio. I'm just wondering if, as we were talking through any of those, maybe specific project types or different things like that kind of came back up in your memory about, I don't really, seeing one kind of project is maybe not as helpful, or?
Not really. I don't really have any other answers. If they want to message me on LinkedIn after this or tomorrow, I'll be happy to connect with them and answer any questions.
Awesome. Yeah, and that is something I forgot to mention at the top. I shared my LinkedIn in the chat, but we've got lots of different ways to connect with Carl there on the reference sheet. Just in that Carl piece of the bio, we've got LinkedIn, website, some of the articles that he's written over on Medium and Dribble. Great work that he does over at Design Portfolio Review, along with his ebook, How to Land UX and Product Design Jobs. So
yeah, if you message me on LinkedIn, just give me a little bit of chance to answer you, because I get lots of messages per day.
Yeah.
Besides my full-time job I have to do.
And let them know that you're coming from the Thinkful Speaker Series webinar. Awesome. So let's jump back into the Q&As here. So let's see. So we've got a question. Even though you didn't work as an intern at Facebook, is it hard to get into Facebook as an entry-level product designer? So for any of these ones that are kind of more specifically related to just Facebook, I'd actually like to kind of unpack it and expand it. I want to make sure that we're giving everybody tools kind of across the board, not just for one specific company. So I guess if you want to just talk about just larger companies in general, is it harder to get into those larger companies as an entry-level designer, or should you be looking at maybe starting as an intern at one of these companies?
Yeah, every company has different rules about interns and so forth. Some people have to be out of college. A lot of smaller companies, you probably don't have to. But, I've interviewed people from all sorts of backgrounds, right? And it's a tough one to answer, because we look for, in general, companies look for strong UX, strong visuals, that you're able to think about the products, what the products need, and kind of just telling your story, right? So I think a big interviewing piece is kind of talking about your story. How you got into design, what you're working on, any data points around your designs. And that's, even when you I'll put that in a portfolio too, right? Or LinkedIn, kind of, you designed this, got 30% more users. All those little things kind of help sell you and kind of help you get that next job, right? But I've hired people with a lot of experience, not that much experience. But I think it all comes down to kind of a little bit about your background, kind of where you came from, your portfolio, your projects that you're working on. But I think a lot of this is kind of telling your story, and talking about your designs.
Awesome. Yeah, great question. And awesome. Thank you, Carl, for that. Kind of next question to dig into here. Payel asks, how much information should one display on the portfolio from previous experience? Kind of with that consideration or that caveat that a lot of tech industry work is under NDA or non-disclosure agreements.
Yeah, so it's funny, because I swear when I was getting into recruiting, there's no such thing as NDA, but now there's everyone has NDA and passwords and all that kind of stuff, right? I don't know. I think I'm probably different. I'll probably say something different than other people would say, but I think if a recruiter is asking, if it's on your portfolio and a recruiter or a design manager wants to look at their projects, then I think you should probably show them, right? Unless it's a very strict NDA. I guess you can have a personal NDA that you can have them sign, but when you're interviewing here at other companies, they usually ask you to sign an NDA anyways, right? But I think, if all your projects are under NDA, which I've seen before, I think it's hard to get a job because you can't showcase any of your work, right? I think I don't like it when people do it, but I think a lot of people use it as kind of a way to get in, where I could only come see you in person and show my projects. And sometimes I get kind of turned off from that. I think it's kind of a sneaky way to people that are trying to get in the door without showing their work. But I think if you're confident and you have strong work, show it, right? Make it password protected, but let that one person see it, right? Because it's gonna be a lot easier to get a job that way.
Awesome, very cool. Yeah, a great, very specific, very practical question as well too. So, yeah, Ashish had asked, every year almost 20,000 students apply for a summer product design internship. So the question is, what things do recruiters like you look for? Again, this is a Facebook specific one, but kind of we got to unpack some of those things that that you are looking for in general for kind of those product design internships, right? Some of that storytelling, some of those ways to put your best pieces forward.
Yeah, I think for I don't do all. We have a group that does all the internships, but I know from them that just companies in general, right? There's so many applicants, right? Sometimes this is a numbers game. It's a lot of luck, right? Because you have so many people that are applying for this position, right? And you're going to have so many people get the job, right? So I always say, always apply multiple times, every year. But I think back to that, strong visual design will definitely help a ton. Sometimes companies go after certain schools. Sometimes it depends. But usually, if your portfolio is strong with strong visuals, it's a lot better chance you'll get the job.
Awesome. I'm looking at the time. We've got about 5 minutes left in our regularly scheduled time. So we don't want to go too much over that. If we do a couple minutes, totally fine. But for our Q&A here, we'll start to go a little bit more rapid fire for ones that we can. Again, I just want to make sure that we are getting a chance to address as many of those questions as possible. As Philip asks, do employee referrals actually help when applying for a larger company?
I believe so, yes. I think it always helps to know somebody, and if it's a good recommendation, it's going to help a lot.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yes, it is.
So Rahul asked, is it true when people say your portfolio is not a case study? And then we talked a little bit about what your portfolio should actually encompass during the kind of pro portfolio piece before the mistakes.
Yeah, I think portfolios, you will showcase case studies in your portfolio, and that will probably help you get a job. But everyone has, if you come from a boot camp, everyone has case studies, right? And so the recruiters just kind of briefly look over it. You can do it, great. Again, with the stronger visuals, it's going to help you.
Awesome. Stephen asked, kind of on that same piece from well back when we were talking about actually reaching out to that designer, that recruiter. When taking a designer recruiter out for coffee or anything, what are a couple good, one or two standout questions that might make you stand out, give you some valuable information about the company? Yeah,
I believe I just launched a blog post about that on Dribble. It's on my LinkedIn, probably. Take a look at it. But I think some questions is you want to act interested, right? And you're kind of interviewing the company too, right? You don't need to bargain with questions, but I think you want to know kind of what you could be potentially working on. What who works on the who does what on the team? What is the team makeup of? And kind of what products are the company working on and kind of striving towards, right? I do enterprise. I recruit for enterprise. We're building enterprise products, for example, right? So definitely ask questions about kind of what you're working on, and so forth, and kind of what if there's any metrics that you have to kind of obtain, to definitely work on and so forth.
Awesome. Another question from Uyen here: is it important to include an interactive prototype / video of the interactive prototype in your portfolio? Do recruiters care, or can you or is it fine to just have more of that static experience?
I think static experience is great. If you do a video, awesome. I think a lot of people use Envision prototypes help. A lot of companies want you to have some experience, I think, these days in interaction design, right? So another new hot topic, right? Interaction design, right? So that's interaction that a mobile app has, right? From screen to screen or function to function, right? So I think showing, if you can do a video walkthrough, do it. Why not? If you do a prototype on InVision, even better. I don't think every recruiter will probably spend 10 minutes looking at each one, but I think it would definitely help.
Awesome. Yeah, another great question. And just kind of real quick, as we're going through these, yeah, definitely want to thank everybody for posting these. These are really great questions. Carl and I always enjoy kind of our conversations anyways, but they become even better, more rich, more engaging when we have some of these questions, some of these great discussions to start off from. So big thanks to everybody out there who's posted so far. So Emily asks, when you're starting out, would you recommend starting out as a designer on a design team, or is it okay to be the sole designer at a company?
That's all preference, your preference. I was a sole designer and I've worked on larger teams. I think larger teams are more structured. If you want to be more free in your designs, then be a sole designer.
Very cool. So Davika asks, can we connect with you for portfolio review?
Yep, feel free to message me on LinkedIn and I'll send you a link to my website.
Awesome. We got the thumbs up there. And again, all the contact information in the reference sheet. So Stephen asks, it sounds like from boot campers, visual design is really a strong way to stand out. It's the best way to stand out, but still kind of strike that balance for following best practices from established companies, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, etc.
Don't really get the question, but I think having strong visuals will definitely have a better chance getting into a lot of these big companies. Even though they have design systems in place and all of that, and you're not as free, I would say, but they definitely look for people with strong visuals.
Very cool. Tressa had asked, do you have an example of a good resume? Yeah. Do we have an example of one, or?
I'll try to find. I had a really good one a few months back that I recruited. I'll try to see if I can find her LinkedIn or resume, or if not, I could always make one. Make mine even better.
Yeah, and then Tressa, connect with either of us, both of us, Carl, after to kind of follow up on that. Great question. Akshay had asked, what are some of the keywords that might jump out for you in the resume?
Yeah. So, sometimes school, I would say a lot of companies, even you could put he or she, or any design schools or boot camps or colleges. So those are, product thinking, UX design, visual design, product design, enterprise, consumer, B2B, B2C, and so forth. Those are all those kind of keywords that I would add to your LinkedIn or resume. Awesome.
Great question. Thank you, Akshay. From Murillo here, how many projects in the portfolio is the ideal number? If you're junior or if you're senior, if there's a difference between those.
I would say 2 or 3 projects. If you only have one, you only have one, right? And you're looking for probably for more of an internship. But I think the more companies and probably, I always say look on AngelList and like Fiverr and Elance and all Upwork. If you ever want any freelance projects to see, you can put a portfolio up.
Very cool. So Davika had asked, another piece on that internship question. I'm going to go ahead and archive that. I think we got a chance to talk about that quite a bit. And then another question here. When we apply, if we get a rejection in the same week, is that usually because of the resume or is it because of the portfolio?
It could be a lot of different things. Just not the skill set they're looking for. It could be portfolio, it could be resume. It could be anything, to be honest.
Okay.
There's no answer for that because it really depends on the company's skill set they're looking for.
Yeah, so that's going to be a pretty variable one.
Experience and if you're looking for more enterprise experience, I look for everybody, to be honest. But a lot of companies, if they're looking for enterprise only, then if you don't have enterprise, you're probably not going to be chosen for that position or consumer or whatever it is.
Yeah. Awesome. So question from Heather. What about students who have educational projects their work done for portfolio woodwork? Any advice about how to make your portfolio stand out if you don't have experience with a company?
I think any project at all, if it's for school, add it. Again, just make sure it's some strong work. If not, redesign it and make it stronger.
Very cool. Alan asks, the general advice is to show the work that you want to be doing in the next role on your portfolio. What's your opinion on showing a mix of product design, UX specific, and visual specific work on your website?
I think do it. I think if you're looking for a position in product design or UI design or UX design or whatever, I think you should show those projects on your portfolio.
Awesome. Chris asks, what if the visual design isn't perfect, but you coded the whole portfolio from scratch? I think we actually talked about this a little bit before when we were talking about the development piece.
Yeah. I don't know. I think if it doesn't look good, don't put it out there, right? I don't think it's going to help you. So if you're able to spend a few hours to redesign it, then I would redesign it.
Awesome.
If you're looking for a job and you don't need coding experience, then they probably don't. They think, oh, that's cool, but they don't really. It won't help you. I don't think.
Yeah. Question from Ilya here. When you're looking at candidates, how important is it to have formal education in UX/HCI? Do those with a master's have significant advantage over someone who's self-taught or went through that bootcamp experience?
Good question. I think some companies really care about college you go to. I think a lot of big companies don't care anymore about college or not.
More about the strength of that portfolio piece, right? Having that proof that you can do what you say you can do.
Yeah, I don't know. So I never graduated college to begin with, right? But I did some courses, right? So that helped, right? So I think any kind of schooling does help, and it kind of puts a little stamp of approval, right? But if you have no schooling behind you and you're a solid designer, then I don't think it's going to matter that much. If you can show your work and do these interviews and pass them, awesome.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. All right. Question from Davika here. How often should we get our portfolio reviewed? Always believed in feedback, and feedback helps a lot.
Yeah. I wouldn't ask 100 people for feedback for your portfolio because you're probably going to get different answers all the time. I think asking 2 or 3 people is I think is what you should do to get kind of feedback on your portfolio. But I wouldn't do any more, or else you're going to spin your wheels and you're going to keep changing it over and over and over and over.
Yeah. Awesome. So Rahul asks, and it got an upvote, how do you feel about dark mode portfolios?
I don't think I've seen one yet.
All right.
But I think dark mode's a new thing, right? But I don't think it's going to help you or hurt you. But I have not seen one yet.
Yeah. All right. Stephen asks, when you iterate on an existing product, it's not like it has to be used, right? As long as it shows concepts. Trying to figure out what counts as a project on a portfolio.
A project, I would say that I think a lot of companies like to see products that have been launched. But if you can't, if you don't have that, then I'll just show any kind of strong work that you have, right? I think anything is better than none if it's strong. But you can always make up use cases and so forth for your projects.
Awesome. Akshay had asked, could you cover just a quick bit on informational interviews? And I think that quick bit will be, what are some ways to get informational interviews?
I think a lot of it is, passing the first phone screen, right? Is just, the first phone screen is just kind of telling your story, right? And can you do UI design? Have you have products that have launched? Do you work with researchers? Whatever it may be, right? And then if usually you just want to tell your story kind of clearly, right? If it's all over the place, I think it would be hard for you to pass through. But if you're just precise and talk about your projects, then you'll most likely get through to the next rounds.
Awesome. Another quick question here. Does a designer need to have social media presence if they want to showcase their visual design skills?
Negative. I think if you have a portfolio, yes, but I don't think you need a Twitter account or Instagram or Facebook or whatever.
Very cool. It's reassuring for people like me who do not have a huge social media presence. Quick question here from Uyen. If I also do smaller projects and I do UI UX blogging, can I put that on my site where my portfolio is?
Yes, for sure.
Awesome. Shell asks, how much is coding experience a plus when applying? Would there be any merit at all in mentioning that you also did the coding implementation for a design?
If you need some experience in coding, it's going to help you. If not, I don't think it matters that much.
Awesome.
I think maybe it's a company, yes, maybe. But I think if a big company, they already have developers, so it won't make a difference.
Very cool. Very cool. And yeah, again, appreciate everybody posting these. And if you want to unpack these a little bit more with us, continue that conversation. Again, reach out to either of us. But I do just want to make sure that we at least get to acknowledge these and give a quick answer for the ones that we have. So Chris asks, have you seen companies transition away from saying that they're looking for a quote unquote culture fit?
Yes, because I think everyone comes from a different culture. But I think a lot of people, when they interview, they're always like, I want to make a difference, right? Every company wants to make a difference out there, right? But yeah, I think that culture fits kind of no one's really aiming for that only now.
Mm-hmm. It feels like it's becoming something that's less helpful and can be more problematic, and so why kind of have that part of the discussion? Yeah. So David asks, or just a quick comment here for everybody. I have a significant number of articles about resumes, specifically on groups.io in the net gold list. Also sources there about internship. Very, very cool. I always love when we get these discussions, share some of those resources as well. So yeah, definitely go check those out. Groups.io and the net gold list. Awesome. Last couple questions here, last two here in the Q&A. Shell had asked, I don't remember if you mentioned this earlier, but does the chat from this webinar get saved too? That's more for me on the logistics front. People posted some great resources. Yes, I believe during that webinar replay, which again will get sent as a link to your email, I believe that you get to see the video along with the chat that's going with it. If not, definitely reach out to me and I'll be making sure to share all of those resources. Got those aggregated here. I can definitely go back into the chat for any specific ones that you want to find. And then very last question here in the Q&A piece. Chris asks, do you have a stance on whiteboard versus design challenges? And what should the time frame for a design challenge be? And should it be paid? So good questions here around that design challenges piece.
I think it's a big topic right now. I've done design challenges at Facebook. We just ask you to walk through 2 of your projects, which I think is totally fair. So create a presentation and talk about 2 of your projects, right? So it's worth creating a presentation and putting it together, but you're not designing a project for a company, which I think is more fair, right? When you're spending 40 hours or more creating a whole feature for a website for a company, I don't know. I feel like sometimes it should be paid because that's a lot of time on your day, right? Sometimes a lot of companies will maybe use it, right, or change a few things, right? I've heard that a lot, right? So, but I think design challenges are good because it just helps you more prove yourself. But I think it's always good just to, like what we do, I think is fair. We just kind of walk through your project. I think is good enough for companies to do.
Awesome. And then a follow-up quick for that one. If you get turned down after that design challenge, you take the feedback and then you're trying to resubmit, what would your reaction be?
Yeah, a lot of companies do not get feedback anymore just because of HR and stuff. and everyone can take it the wrong way. But you know, you can ask for feedback, and some people will give you some nice feedback. But if not, then we can't give you feedback, so nothing I can do about it, right? But any feedback you get, practice, change it, reply again.
Awesome.
It took me 3 times to get a job at Facebook. I think people do 2 or 3 interviews before they get hired. So.
Yeah, got to have that persistence. I love it. Last question here in the Q&A. We are a good bit over our scheduled time, so I want to make sure we're respecting everybody's time. But Rahul asks, is it okay to show some personality through humor and graphics in your portfolio?
I think if it's appropriate, why not?
I love it. Yeah, make sure it's appropriate. If not, it can always be taken the wrong way, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. Very cool. So with that wraps up our scheduled time here for tonight. Once again, want to thank everybody for joining us today. This has been 8 mistakes that product designers make during the job hunt. Want to thank you all out there, but most importantly, want to thank Carl for sharing your time, sharing your insight and advice here. We all certainly appreciate it.
Please connect online and message me whatever you like.
All right. Awesome, everybody. Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up our session for today. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, great rest of the week ahead, and I hope to see you all online real soon. All right. Goodbye, everybody.